It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. Glad to have you with us. Thanks for riding with us this morning. If you're catching us live on our streaming video network, and if you're joining us on patriotfb.com, that's great news. Appreciate you folks spending your morning with us. You know, Patriot FB is a great new website that is streaming our show live every morning from 8 a.m. onward. And it is a site that is geared and designed to be a replica of Facebook, but without all the censorship, without all the nonsense, and you're likely to meet only patriots there and not trolls and cave dwellers. So I would encourage you to join there. You can go to it by visiting patriotfb, like Foxtrot Bravo, .com. That's patriotfb.com. And you're welcome to go over there, sign up. You can catch the show streaming there live every day. And, of course, you can also catch it on video by visiting americasvoicenow.org. You can simply click the streaming button when the show begins, and just a minute or two after 8, and you can catch it for the duration. You can also catch us on Spreaker, where we have an audio feed that you can capture either during the course of the feed because it's live, if you want to just do audio only. You can also download that into a mobile phone, whether you have an iPhone or an Android type phone, and you can get that application. Just go to either your provider for applications on your phone and type in Spreaker. That's Spreaker. It's like speaker with an R. And then search for Michael Evans, America's Voice Now. You can catch the whole show live right there on your mobile. All right, we're going to hit 4 different topics today. Today is Friday, and it's the 27th. We're almost at the close of the year. There's a couple of things that are out there in the news this morning that I think are worthy of discussion and mention, not the least of which is General Vallely has called for massive civil, peaceful disobedience. We're going to talk about that because that's very closely aligned with the project and the program which I'd put out there quite some time back, calling for essentially the same thing, a massive, peaceful, civil, disobedient march on Washington, and that's outlined in a program which is up on our website at americasvoicenow.org. It's called The Plan to Take Back America, Place All State and Federal Capitals Under Civil Disobedience Siege. So we're going to just analyze the comparisons between his program or his suggested program and what I've talked about in the past and try to give you an understanding of what that might look like. Our second topic is going to be China is claiming that they have a brand new bomber that can nuke U.S. military bases. Now, you know, for the record, this is a disconcerting fact that China lately has been doing a lot of saber rattling. And, you know, China is allegedly, if you listen to the politicians and the polls and the sycophants out there, they are our friend, right? Well, not so much. If you can believe it, we actually paid U.S. aid assistance to them, even though we have a $300 billion trade deficit in 2012. And we've had a $300 billion trade deficit as far back in history as we can remember. Last year, we paid them $28.3 million. In 2013, we paid them a mere $25.5 million because we were cutting back. You know, the truth is, and there's a couple of articles I'm going to refer to during the course of this, the Chinese have been building electromagnetic pulse weapons for use against U.S. carriers in the event that we were to go against them in Taiwan. And in addition to that, they've been developing electromagnetic pulse weapons, which are essentially nuclear weapons without the radiation, and they would completely knock us back into the Stone Age, destroying our entire grid for electricity and all products that run on electricity. There's no faster way to take the most powerful nation in the world down to its knees than an electromagnetic pulse. And the argument is clear. You can do this at a rate, at a height of a couple of 100 miles in the air, and you could blanket the entire nation. If you did it over the ocean, you could do it at 10 miles up and blanket an area that would knock out all of our ships and wipe them basically down to the Stone Age. They'd be dead in the water. The question here is, why is it that the United States is so intent on supporting the efforts of a sworn enemy who makes it clear through their own press statements that they are interested in committing atrocities against this nation? This is their state media that came out the other day bragging about their military prowess. We're going to talk about it because I'll tell you what, frankly, I'm getting a little tired of hearing how friendly China is to the United States when they do everything that is opposite that level of support. I mean, this is a nation which is, frankly, our sworn enemy, and I think we need to start treating them as such. That means, by the way, you can play an active role in that. You can play an active role by making sure that they are stripped of your financial resources, because most of the products that you purchase today are made in China. And so our goal should be to bankrupt the nation that is threatening our actual existence. Our third topic is going to be citizens form armed patrols to protect their own communities. There are cutbacks across the nation in sheriff's departments. There's a specific group that we're going to talk about in Oregon County, and this group is basically going out there, and since their cash-strapped sheriff's department has cut back, they are forming their own citizens' armed patrols. I think it's a great idea, and I would encourage everyone to participate in something like that within their local community. Let's not look at them and say, wow, nice idea, but not do it ourselves. This is my idea, actually, of Homeland Security. If you have any influence in your own community, and even if you don't, I would strongly encourage you to begin the process of organizing these kinds of capabilities within your own town or your own city or your own community. We'll need them sooner than you think, folks. Our fourth and final topic will be Wall Street Honcho says guns and ammo should be a prerequisite for a post-collapse era. Now, when you hear people who are Wall Street insiders talking like that, you've got to wonder, folks, what the deal is and why the vast majority of America is sitting there fat, dumb, and happy in their ignorance. I mean, the reality is that whether this collapse is man-made or whether it's induced or whether it's, some kind of a black op or whether it's some kind of a false flag or whether it's just purely natural, the simple truth is our nation is in major, serious trouble. And an unwillingness, essentially, to recognize that for what it is and take appropriate steps and measures to make sure that you are prepared to protect yourself and your family and your general surrounding community would be a serious mistake. You buy car insurance for a reason, not because you plan on having an accident that day, but because of the likelihood that at some point in time you may well have one. And so what do? We prepare for that by having automobile insurance. Now, we're not hoping to use it. We're not planning to use it. But it's certainly a good idea to protect your own interests, your own family, your own resources to do that. Guns and ammo are no different. And when you've got a Wall Street advisor who's recommending that you have them, I would strongly encourage you to listen to that feedback. Let's talk about our first topic, because General Vallely is one I've talked to you about before. There's a new article out in WorldNet Daily about a retired military commander. Now, Vallely has his own website out there, and I would strongly ask you to go take a look at it. It's called standupamericaus.org. That's standupamericaus.org. This is a website which he's founded, and it's full of all kinds of news and information and so forth and so on. I think that it's one of the better sites out there for alternative information. And the truth is, he's not gilding the lily at all. I mean, He's deadly serious about what he's talking about, and he's coming at it from a perspective of one who knows. Now, he's recommending in this latest discussion that the Egyptian model, which you've heard me talk about many times before, be followed. 33 million people out of 84, right? 85 million people live in Egypt. Fully 33 million of them stood up and said, we've had enough of this tyranny, and we're going to take action to end it. And those people stood up against their government, and they told their officials, we've had enough with you. You're done. You're finished. That's it. You're out. Now, before you go crazy with that idea, let's recognize that nature abhors a vacuum, and political nature especially abhors a vacuum. And so the goal is that we should always look at this with the idea that we're going to have a plan of action to resolve and make sure that the vacuum doesn't occur. Or if it does occur, it's only nanoseconds in its existence. How do we do that? Well, first and foremost, I've called repeatedly for the Tea Party, the Libertarian Party, the Constitutional Party, any organization that's out there, and it doesn't have to be a formal political party, but any organization out there that's patriotically driven, to go out and pool these resources together and accomplish two basic things. One, take out national ad campaigns across the country. Television, radio, newspapers, wherever we can find an access point. Hit that access point with an ad that essentially calls for qualified candidates to apply to be the representatives in a new constitutional republic government. Now, that will accomplish a couple of things. One, it will put everybody in the country suddenly on notice that this whole thing is a lot worse than they think. And I suspect that you will get millions upon millions of Americans who suddenly recognize how far down the rabbit hole we've slid, number one. Number two, those same folks will be, when they come awake, will be desperately hungry for news and information. And those organizations that are the sponsoring candidates or the sponsoring organizations that promote and pay for the advertising will be in a perfect position to have their websites at the bottom of this thing where people can go out and seek information. Their radio hosts talking about it. You know, the Convention of States group and those who are calling for an Article 5 convention to make amendment changes to the Constitution to strengthen it, they have made an enormous amount of headway in a relatively short period of time. You know, sponsored by folks like Mark Levin and things like that, and Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and those guys. But the truth of the matter is, you see, what they've been able to do with talk radio, we could accomplish the same task. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Convention of States and the idea of going in there and creating a new series of amendments to the Constitution, and not necessarily opening the Constitution up for modification, but either selectively modifying one or two amendments. And when I say that, I'm talking about the abuse that the government has taken and the liberalities they've taken with, you know, the three areas of commerce and the general welfare clauses and things like that. Tighten those up so that they cannot be abused. And then, secondarily, put in things like term limits and some other issues. Now, I know there's a lot of vacillation and argument back and forth about what those constitutional amendments should look like and all the... I don't even want to talk about that today. My point is simply this. I don't believe we have the time, and by the way, Vallely agrees with me, that we don't have the time to maybe go that route. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't work on it simultaneously. We should approach this issue from multiple facets, knowing that each element has weight and value and benefit, but not guaranteed. You know, there's none of these that are guaranteed to be able to make it through. And so, what we need is the idea that we have the opportunity to create a group of individuals who will come to essentially come to this new organization, the New Republic organization, that is founded, created, sponsored, and funded by the Tea Party, the Constitution Party, the Libertarian Party, et cetera, et cetera. What you're looking for are individuals to apply to say, yes, I want to be the state representative for district number whatever. I want to be the state senator from state XYZ. I want to be the governor for state ABC. Those people will then be qualified through a vetting process that would be identical to what any candidate running for the current Senate or House or presidency or vice presidency or any other slot would be qualified under. The vetting process has to be thorough, but there are enough people out there who have political experience that they understand what the qualifications are to vet a candidate properly. I mean, we want to make sure that we have people who are going to fill this bill, if you will, as a short-term interim step-in government, who are, one, qualified to meet the requirements of the job. Two, that they have the right spirit and the right tone and the right tenor to go into that job knowing that it is an interim measure and they're doing this as an effort to save and restore our nation. And third, they have to sign an agreement, a contract that says, we may not have constitutional amendment term limits, but I'm limiting myself. I'm going to limit myself by this pact, the Political Accountability Contract and Trust, that says if I attempt to violate any of the tenets of this agreement, my accountability partners, I've talked about this before, and if you want more information on it, you can email me at mike@americasvoicenow.org. The idea is that if you've pre-signed a resignation letter and you've given that to be held in trust by your accountability partners. If at any point in time that representative, who's now the elected representative for that given marketplace or that area, violates any of the terms of that agreement, we don't need to recall them. We simply submit their resignation letter, which is pre-signed by them, and all their accountability partners have to do is date it. That effectively ends their run. So if they go in there and they get corrupted and they betray their constituencies, which almost every time that we see a candidate running, that's exactly what happens, then in that case, we don't have to go through some long drawn-out process to impeach them or get them out of office or to recall them. We simply have the accountability partners do their job and remove him by virtue of, or her, by virtue of a pre-signed resignation letter. Now, these ideas need to be worked at in concert. None of these is foolproof in and of itself. And frankly, none of these is foolproof anyway. I mean, look, the level of apathy in our nation is so steep at this point that, even if we were to be successful at a march on Washington where we said, look, this is a massive civil disobedient march. We've got 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 million people here. We're not leaving until you all do. And we were to get them to agree that the country has to go back to a constitutional, representative foundation. You're going to have a host of screaming memes on the left and in the media that are going to call it a revolution, a coup, and every other darn thing. Now, Vallely's calling for things like a no-confidence vote. The problem is that doesn't have any legal strength or power. It doesn't have any teeth to it. But he does make it clear. He says we need to get off our derrieres. March at the state capitol. March in Washington. Make citizen arrests. He says that when there are those who are, quote, conducting treason, violating the Constitution, violating our laws, that we should not overlook that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm in 100% agreement. He says when you have a president and his team who don't care about the Constitution, they will do anything they can to win. Now, if you go back to the idea of the Article 5 convention and the ability to go in and add amendments or modify amendments, I'm all for that. And I think these concepts should be run in parallel. This is not a linear exercise. We can't have one after another. If one fails, you back it up with a second. You do this in a military engagement fashion. You essentially march forward with multiple strategies simultaneously. Vallely's open for it. I wrote a piece quite some time ago called The Plan to Take Back America. Place all state and federal capitals under civil disobedience siege. And he's suggesting very clearly that many of the same ideas that I've purported in that article would be identical or usable in his scenario, including the idea that we would essentially stop paying taxes, starve the beast of money, stop, making withholding payments and things like that. Stop purchasing, because every purchase that you make effectively feeds the beast. Stop paying your banks, your mortgage companies, your auto loans, your credit card companies. Listen, folks, they can't foreclose and seize the cars of everybody. Place all these funds in designated accounts or escrow, not accounts in a bank because that can be seized, but in designated escrow, and withhold those funds until the state and federal governments capitulate. At the end of the day, assuming they do, you go in and you've got the money to pay your back bills and pay your mortgages and pay your credit card companies and pay your auto loans and so forth and so on. You've got the money sitting there. You've withheld it, but you haven't spent it. Not to mention the fact that this would require a complete freeze of the commerce engine in the United States of America. The idea, folks, is that we would force them to take notice in a massive, peaceful, civil disobedient way. No different than Rosa Parks, but on a massive scale. No different than the civil rights movement of the 60s, but on a massive scale. Now, I hear people argue, well, the federal government can print money. Okay, I get it. They're doing that illegally via the Federal Reserve, but that's okay. They can't print enough money to keep all of the states and themselves afloat. The states run on literally less than a 30-day cycle, folks. Without state sales tax and the income from employer taxes, the state governments would collapse in less than a month. So the point is, at that point, we promote the goals, which is putting this new qualified candidacies in place, and then we begin the immediate process of running true constitutional elections. That's it. But I'm telling you, the alternative is to sit here on our derrieres and do nothing and watch the entire thing go into meltdown. Now, I would encourage you to listen to the quote, which I've put at the bottom of this, and I've read to you many times. If you're a long-time listener, you've heard it a million times, memorize this and start to use it. It was by a guy named Winston Churchill. Still, if you will not fight for the right, when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory will be sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. There may even be a worse case. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory, because it is better to perish than to live as slaves. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot think of a better statement that currently fits our scenario as we stand today. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about these Chinese claims of a new bomber that can nuke U.S. military bases. Now, this is not some unfounded rumor, folks. This is right out of their state military, their state media. Okay? This is government-controlled media spouting that kind of propaganda. That's dangerous talk, ladies and gentlemen. Very dangerous indeed. We're going to take a quick break. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org, and we'll be back in just a moment. You can also find us on patriotfb.com, and you can catch the show streaming live there every day. We'll be back in just a second. Stick with us. All right. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Thanks for joining us. If you're catching us live on our website streaming, it's great news. Appreciate it. Thanks very much. We're working out of our new studio, which we've been building over the last couple of months, and we're looking to even expand that. We actually have an opportunity where we can obtain a very sizable facility and create more than just a studio, but an actual television broadcast facility. And so if there's any way that you are in a position to help us and assist us with that, we would greatly appreciate it. Our goal, of course, is to create not only this radio program, but also to create actual news broadcasting and commentary programs where we can fill a need, a niche market that really calls for the truth in alternative media. Most of the vast majority of the media out there is not telling you the truth. There are alternative media websites and radio programs that are. But I got to tell you, folks, they're in the minority. And the mass media is doing their very, very best to disenfranchise or to discredit them. The truth is they've sold themselves down the road to the devil. They've made their deal. And we're now stuck with misinformation, propaganda, disinformation, and all of the things that are leading our nation into apathy and self-destruction. You can help us with that, and I would ask you to contact me. A couple of ways you can do that. One, if you can be a financial assistance, if you've got an investment fund available to you, if you've got funds that you can put towards that project, and on a larger scale, I'd certainly like to talk to you. Even if it's on a smaller scale, I'd be more than happy to chat with you. We have some very specific needs that we have for equipment and things like that, and please feel free to contact me about it. You can reach me via email at mike@americasvoicenow.org. That's mike@americasvoicenow.org. In the subject line, just put in video studio or television studio, and I'll be more than happy, and a contact number for you, and I'll be more than happy to give you a shout, and we can talk a little bit further about it. In the meantime, of course, we have our ongoing expenses, and if you could support us in any way, shape, or form, we'd be very, very grateful and appreciative of that. You can go to our webpage, and you can use a PayPal account or a credit card through a PayPal link on the main home page of our website. You can also mail funds to us at our P.O. Box. We have a P.O. Box here. It's called America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195, and that's in West Plains, Missouri. That's M-O, for those of you who aren't local. Mo. And our zip code is 65775. That's America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195, West Plains, Missouri, 65775. I would like to mention a couple of our sponsors who have been very, very gracious about supporting our program. One is the Battery Station. They're located at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains. Kevin is a friend of mine. He's the owner of that facility. And he's got a lot of great products over there, and he's very, very supportive of America's Voice Now, and has been for a very long time. Great store, great operation, and a great opportunity for you to work with him. If you're local, we also offer a co-op program through that, and I'd like to encourage you to take part in that. The Battery Station's phone number is 417-257-7799, and you can reach them by going to the web at batterystation.com. You can also, again, call them at 417-257-7799. Now, they do their annual Christmas giving to the troops out in Afghanistan. They continue to send packages well into the new year. So if you can help them in any way, feel free to give a call. They can tell you what they need in terms of product. Or if you can help them support in some of the expenditures that they do out of their own pocket to ship all this stuff over there, that would be great as well. Again, it's the Battery Station. Batterystation.com is the web address, 417-257-7799. Also, make sure that you visit with our friends over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. They are located right on the square in West Plains. And right behind the barbershop, which is an excellent place to get your hair cut, they do all shave and a haircut, old style with the razor and the whole 9 yards, folks. It's actually a great place to visit. And you'll meet some other cool people there. Old checkerboard style, it's really an interesting place. But right behind there, they also have their brand new smoke shop, which is a tobacconist dream. They have cigars and tobacco and pipes and all kinds of accoutrements and accessories that go with that. Please make sure that you visit them as well. You can also find them on Facebook as well. And that's called the Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop. So let's talk a little bit about this issue here with China and the development of this new bomber. The issue for them is simply this: They're trying to intimidate the United States into acquiescing to their international demands, monetarily, militarily, financially, and trade and economy and so forth. Their state media. Now, remember that China is a communist nation, folks. This is not, this is not a republic. They may have a constitution, but trust me, this is a communist nation. And their state media, which is run and sponsored and paid for and promoted and checked by the government, is bragging about their military prowess and how they have created this new strategic bomber that can attack U.S. military bases in South Korea, as well as on the Japanese mainland, using long-range nuclear cruise missiles. Now, if you and I did business on a routine basis, and you had a store and I had a store and we both shopped in each other's stores, and you began saying and putting signs up in your store that derided my store and told me that and told your customers that I was not a friend, I was dangerous, and how long do you think we'd continue to do trade? How much longer do you think it would be before I would say, I'm not going to go into your store anymore, nor am I going to send any of my customers over to you, nor, frankly, am I going to do any further business with you in any way, shape, or form? You see, the problem here is that this is an organization and a national government which, quite frankly, at this stage in the game, rivals us economically, politically, financially, and they're working against us actively on multiple fronts. One, they're one of the primary partners in the BRICS nations. The BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and a number of other countries, including Japan just joined. And the BRICS countries are seeking to unseat the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. Furthermore, they're seeking to destroy the petrodollar agreement we have with Saudi Arabia, which basically says we'll protect their monarchies as long as they force everyone to convert their currency to U.S. dollars before they buy oil. Now, nothing could be further than George Washington's admonitions to us to stay clear of foreign alliances and treaties that, ultimately will embroil us in their problems. When we look back at where we are in the petrodollar agreement and the World Trade Organization agreements and the United Nations, we're doing everything against what George Washington made us a clear and repeated recommendation to avoid. And when you look at China and what their attempts are economically to disenfranchise and unseat the United States as the world's economic power, and you look at what they're doing in terms of their military escalation, they have been very, very, very aggressive of late. If you didn't hear about it, about 10 days ago, one of our ships was out there in open international waters, and they took one of their ships and pulled right in front of it and then shut the engines down and almost caused an ocean collision between, these are massive ships, folks. These aren't a couple of small fishing boats. It was only with an extraordinary level of work on the part of the United States captain of the ship that they pulled in front of that avoided the collision. And of course, the media is silent about it. The president and the entire government all say, "Oh, it was just it was a mistake and all of that." Now, there's no mistake. Even the Chinese came out afterward and said there was no mistake. There's been a few voices in the Congress and in the media that have spoken out about it. But for the vast majority of Americans, they don't even know what happened. They don't realize that China lately has been promoting and pushing our buttons by flying within ranges of our bases, flying within ranges of our coast, basically, telegraphing that, cruising around as if to say, look, we can do whatever we want, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. There's all of this issue going on between China and Japan in reference to those tiny islands out there. The Chinese are very upset that we've taken the side of Japan, which we're contractually agreed and required to do under a treaty with Japan. But now when they're sitting out there, and this is not the first article that's come out like this. They've had multiple articles that came out in their state-sponsored media that talk about how their intention is to ultimately destroy the United States of America. Why are we doing business with them on any level? Folks, there's an article in the Examiner. I'll link it in the YouTube video's subject matter. China developing super electromagnet pulse bomb to use in a war against the United States. That's the headline. China is gearing up for war against the U.S., and their top weapon is a super electromagnetic pulse bomb that can blanket the U.S. and send America back to the Dark Ages in less than a second. MITRE is the research report group that did this study, and they're talking about this arsenal known, or this concept, which is called Shishoujian, or it's called, it's in English that's translated into the assassin's mace. Now, their goal and their plan is twofold. One, they have their own battles going on with Taiwan. They don't like the fact that Taiwan is a democratic republic, even though they are called the Republic of China. And we've stood behind Taiwan's freedom and independence for quite a few times. And they've threatened that in the event that we were to side with Taiwan in a literal fisticuffs scenario, that they would EMP our ships out in the open ocean, utilizing these EMP tactics. Send one of these things up to 8-10 miles, set it off. There's no radiation, but it sends out this electromagnetic pulse that melts all electronics and essentially turns anything electronic into nothing greater than a boat anchor. Used over land, the scenario would be an EMP or a series of EMPs launched that would detonate anywhere between 100 and 200 miles above the Earth and blanket the United States with EMP, which would essentially fry every piece of electronics equipment that is not properly secured in a Faraday box or hardened and so forth. It would completely wipe out our entire grid, and it would leave most Americans literally in the Stone Age. They're not even shy about talking about this, folks. I mean, the Washington Times reported recently under a Folks, are we actually having a conversation here about a direct threat against the safety and the security of our nation? And we're talking about an enemy which, frankly, survives almost exclusively on the amount of money that we pump into their economy. Meanwhile, we're pumping literally hundreds of millions of dollars into them under humanitarian aid. I mean, that's so asinine. They get $2.6 billion in humanitarian aid globally. A large percentage of that comes from the UN, and we're the number one funder of the UN, so we're responsible for 60% of it, not to mention another $26 or $28 million we donate or designate every year. But I got to tell you, this is not tinfoil hat conspiracy stuff. Not when China's own military and their own newspapers are publishing this with approval, sanction, and the desire of their ruling government. Now, you can call it, bluff. You can call it bluster. You can say, it's just sword rattling. I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this is no different than the kind of talk we heard from Adolf Hitler. None. And if you think for a moment that China would not love to come over here and grab the resource value that America can provide, and just oil and gas and you know, I mean, you got to be kidding me. An EMP attack would essentially damage the entire American grid, and it could come in on an intercontinental ballistic missile. It could come from a submarine sitting at 200 miles off the coast, and they simply launch one. We'd even have no warning. None. I mean, we're talking about something that would be in the air for, you know, a matter of a minute or two, 5 minutes. All they'd have to do is detonate this about 400 kilometers, they call it, which is, that's what, for a couple, 30, let's see, 200 miles over the central United States, and they'd blanket the entire continental U.S. in less than a second with an electromagnetic pulse that would turn every piece of electronics in the United States into slag. I got to ask you, folks, this is stuff coming out of the Asian Times. This is stuff coming out of their own newspapers. If you don't see that as a clear and exigent threat to our nation, I'm stunned. Why is our Congress not all over this? Or are they complicit? You've got to ask yourself that question. You must ask yourself that question. You may not like the discomfort you feel when you begin to wonder whether or not our alleged representatives and leaders are complicit. But you know something? There's no other way to look at this other than to recognize that there is a concept out there that somehow or other there is no explanation for, other than the fact that obviously these people are all working in concert, or at least in acquiescence, to China's threats. Because we're taking no action economically, militarily. I mean, would China allow us to do that to them? What do you think Putin would do if we started mouthing off in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal talking about how we had EMP weapons that could wipe Russia off the face of the map or turn it into a 6th century Stone Age? Even Putin, by the way, has been throwing this kind of talk out there. We've had a series of Russian bombers, Russian submarines in the Gulf of Mexico that have been, you know, patrolling about and showing themselves as a sample of how dangerous they can be to us, to let us fear them. With all due respect, America, if you don't see that stuff for what it is, I suggest that you're really either clueless or you want to hide your head in the sand. But you know what the problem is when you do that? Your butt is sticking way up in the air. I'm going to leave you to your own imagination to figure out the result of that. The problem that we have at this stage in the game is those people that we have assisted, dragged for all intents and purposes in large measure, kicking and screaming from the third world themselves, are now threatening to bomb us back into it. That's a dangerous place for America. And I hold our current representatives in government accountable. I hold them accountable for a number of things, not the least of which is they're taking no action to tone down this rhetoric, to condemn it. I mean, this should be the topic of every representative in the United States of America should be grabbing a microphone of a mass media organization and saying, this kind of talk is dangerous on a global level. We resent it, we reject it, and we demand that China withdraw these statements. But no, they don't. They're not going to talk about it at all. They'd rather sit and figure out some way that they can shaft our own military retirees out of a couple of measly bucks while they give the civilian employees of the federal government a pay raise through an executive action by Barack Hussein Obama, the dictator-in-chief, the liar-in-chief, the un-American Manchurian candidate-in-chief. Folks, listen. We're not talking here. I mean, they're throwing everything at us on the NSA and the DHS and all this nonsense about the war on terror, and they're ignoring the number one terrorist organization in the world. China. China uses North Korea as their little boy. They let North Korea go out there and do stupid stuff to see what the world reaction will be, and then say, hey, we didn't have anything to do with it. That's kind of like the drug dealer who gets his little brother to carry the dope, because if he gets popped, the kid's only going to get, a little bit of time in a youth prison. Whereas the adult brother who's over 18 would go to prison for a long time. So he lets the little kid carry all the dope. No different, is it? You got North Korea out there aggressively, and look, they've published in their papers that they intend to nuke the United States, blah, blah, blah. And everybody says, come on, that's just crazy talk. North Korea doesn't have the capability for that, blah, 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 blah. Well, let's ask ourselves the question. Who do you think gave North Korea nuclear capability? I didn't think of that. You think North Korea, who can't come up with enough rice to feed their own people, sat down and figured out how to build a nuclear weapon? How to mount it on a missile that could be intercontinentally launched, multi-stage? I hardly think so. The truth is, our nation is in severe exigent danger. And while you're being told that it's a couple of guys running around in the third world with towels on their heads, the real threat is 1, China, 2, Russia, and the most important threat to the freedom and the liberty of America is Washington, D.C. And you're not even aware of it. What does that tell you? I mean, I encourage you to go out and get a book I recently read called 1 Second After. And it talks about exactly this scenario. A nuclear weapon detonated high enough that there's no real fallout danger, but it does an EMP pulse that wipes out, America into a stone age. The massive die-off from people who rely on medication and hospitals and surgeries and dialysis and so forth and so on would be so catastrophic, we'd lose a third of our population between that and violence and riots and everything else, literally in a matter of 30 days. And a defenseless nation would be ripe for the picking by China and or Russia. Ladies and gentlemen, the real threat to you is not the isolated attack that can be done where 30 or 50 or 100 people are killed. The real threat to you comes from Washington, D.C., which is planning the destruction of the United States. And I suspect at this point in time, I'm almost willing to say hand in hand with China and Russia for whatever they've been promised. And they're going to use our own nation against us. It's time to start reading and educating yourself and preparing. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to tackle our third topic. Citizens form armed patrols to pick up where civilian law enforcement cannot do so. Stick with us. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I am your host. We're in our third of four segments. This is the mid part of our show. We broadcast live every day, Monday through Friday, from 8 to 10 a.m. Central. You can listen to us on 99.3, that's KUNQ, out of Houston, Missouri. They play our program from midnight to 2 a.m., and we encourage you to participate in that. Totally free radio. We also broadcast live on our website, which you can catch from 8 to 10 a.m. in the morning. We also broadcast on Patriot FB in an audio stream that you can catch there live every day from 8 to 10 a.m. There are also a number of other great hosts there, and I would encourage you to listen to them. You have Conservative Junction Radio, which is an outstanding program. I listened to it the other night, and I'll tell you what, he sounds a lot like I do. I think, as an alternative, and he's been at it for his whole life, not like me. But the idea of where we are and what we're, the things we're dealing with right now is J.J. McCarthy is very, very aggressive about talking about. I mean, look, folks, it's time to take the political correct gloves off and really look at our true situation. Stop pretending things are much better than they are, because that leaves us and leads us to a false level of security that does not exist. The Midnight Patriot talks about this from 9 o'clock till 12 a.m., 9 p.m. to 12 midnight, Central Standard Time again. These are all Central Times, by the way. So we're live from 8 to 10. Conservative Junction Radio with J.J. McCarthy is on from 2, I believe it's 2 to 4 in the afternoon, or 2 to 5, excuse me. And then Jeff with Midnight Patriot from 9 p.m. at night till 12. Now, this is a great opportunity for you to meet other similarly minded patriots by going to patriotfb.com and joining there. It's like Facebook, but for patriots. And they're pretty careful to make sure that the people who register are not either internet trolls or government agents who are really just getting in there to try to build a Facebook-like social network scenario. Not saying they can't. God only knows Edward Snowden has revealed to us how much they actually can do, which is pretty frightening stuff. But the truth is, you need to be around people who will share information that you don't necessarily have access to yourself or haven't found. Somebody else has dug up a story that's important. You need to be able to make friends with people that are like-minded with you so that you can identify and figure out, where any alliances may lead. Doesn't work when the attacker is standing over you with an open knife or a loaded weapon, or is in your home and has got your wife or your daughter. Because the country has been systematically brainwashed to believe that there is no excuse for violence. And I say, that's a bald-faced lie. Just call 911. Never take action. Hogwash. You're in that home, somebody comes through that door at night, and they got the wrong intentions. You lay them out. You're within your rights to do that legally, and more importantly, you're within your rights to do that biblically, socially, spiritually. God has given us, and I don't care whether you believe in God as a creator or whether you believe that, I don't care what your religious beliefs are. Your creator endowed you with the ability to defend yourself, and that is your first responsibility. Yourself and your family. And you have every right to take matters into your own hands to defend your life. There's an article out there this morning in Fox about citizens take the law into their own hands after a cash-strapped Oregon County guts the sheriff. Create armed patrols in defiance. Excuse me. Got a frog in my throat. In defiance of local officials. These officials said, you can't do that. That's vigilantism. And they said, no, it's not. It's called self-preservation. And we've paid you to do it. And you've squandered and wasted our money in other areas. And now you don't have enough money out of the resources we've given you to do the job. The county government has raised safety concerns. You know what? The truth of the matter is, I know a lot of folks who own, and in many cases, because I live in Missouri, carry weapons. Most of them are more responsible and are as equally well trained with those devices as most of the law enforcement people I've met in my life. And I've met a lot of people in law enforcement. Some as friends, some not so much. Now, the county government is saying, this is a safety issue. Well, isn't it a safety issue for your neighborhood to be abandoned by the people that you've actually paid and funded with in advance with your tax money, who now have abandoned you? The government in Josephine County, which, by the way, is 70% owned by the federal government in terms of its land mass, they relied on federal timber subsidies to pay the bills. But when the federal government cut back on that and terminated the funding, county government officials scrambled in May of 2012 to pass a tax levy to make up a $7.5 million budget shortfall. Now, the county residents voted against this additional levy because their attitude is, hey, we're already being taxed enough. What are you spending the money on that we've given you? So what did the county do? Just like your federal government, they took punitive action against the community, and they gutted their county sheriff's department. The major crime unit was closed. Dozens of prisoners were released from the county jail. And the department cut out operational hours Monday through Friday to only 8 hours a day. Doesn't that sound familiar? Kind of like, oh, so you want sequester, huh? I'll show you sequester. Let's see. Let's close all the national parks. Let's shut down the White House. Oh, you want to shut down the government? Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually spend extra money to make you pay. We're going to make this painful. You want sequester? You want cuts? I'm going to show you cuts. You know what the example of that presidential action was? That was not a government by rule of law. That was government by hissy fit from a petulant, screaming, whining belly-aching child. A disobedient, spoiled child who happens to bear the name of Barack Obama. This county is no different. They did the same thing. You want cuts? We'll give you cuts. We're gonna cut everything to the bone, and you're gonna pay. Ladies and gentlemen, when your government acts like that, the Sheriff's Department issued a press release. They actually had the gall to issue a press release announcing the deputies would only be responding to what they deemed to be, quote, life-threatening situations. They forced the longest-serving cop on the force in all the three agencies that were county sponsored to retire based on budget cuts. He said he found that the sheriff's declaration in the press release was unacceptable. He says, who else is going to protect you when your government can't? And I might remind you, by the way, that our founders told us, and we all know it to be true, that government's only purpose is to protect us and our rights. Does the current government that you live under, whether state or federal or city or county or community, sound like that to you? Well, this guy Selig, who was the Ken Selig, he was the longest-serving law enforcement officer. He and another guy named Pete Scaglione, they created this thing called the North Valley Community Watch, countywide organization. And they decided they were going to step up and help the people in non-life-threatening situations, predominantly property crimes and the like. It's only one of a handful of community groups that have formed up since these cuts went into effect. And they're not just doing the typical neighborhood watch thing. The sheriff's office actually narrowed the scope of their function to life-threatening situations. But they actually went out there and said to people who felt uncomfortable and felt unsafe because of the lack of sheriff protection to relocate somewhere else. You've got to be kidding me. Frankly, folks, the community should have gotten together and grabbed a hold of that sheriff and thrown his rear end in jail. His own jail. Quote, the sheriff's office regretfully advises that if you know you are in a potentially volatile situation, for example, you are a protected person in a restraining order that you believe the respondent may violate, you may want to consider relocating to an area with adequate law enforcement services. You've got to be kidding me. Sorry, I'm coughing. I don't know what's the matter with my throat, but so Selig's Community Watch. This is Ken Selig. He was the guy who retired, from the cuts. He was the oldest, longest-serving law enforcement agent. His Community Watch group was looking to fill in the cracks where law enforcement had dropped the ball. They meet once a month to discuss crime, and they teach approximately 100 members of their, community organization about personal safety. They've also trained a response team, which consists of 12 different people, and they respond to the scene of reported non-life-threatening situations if they get called. So if somebody, has their home robbed or has some kind of a property crime, they're the ones who show up because the sheriff's department has completely abdicated their responsibility to do so. Now, the response team does carry firearms, legally. Their main goal is to provide a deterrent presence. But they say that in the vacuum, hey, if there's no law enforcement, somebody's got to substitute for that. Quote, we believe responsible citizens doing responsible things make it hard for criminals to do irresponsible things. Ladies and gentlemen, that ought to be a national motto. Let me say it again. Write it down. We believe responsible citizens doing responsible things make it hard for criminals to do irresponsible things. It's too long for a bumper sticker, but I got to tell you, anybody who owns a business of any kind ought to have that kind of a placard built or sign printed up and put in their windows and put on their door. He says, Ken Selig says that politics are behind the county government's decision to not funnel what funds they do have toward law enforcement. They're pressuring the citizens to pass an additional tax hike that these people just can't afford. So, in order to accomplish that, they're using the same tactic that Barack Obama used on the entire country. The shutdown of the government and the sequester and the effort, the design, the Machiavellian intention to make things as painful and to inflict as much damage as possible on the citizenry of the country, in this case of the county, to achieve some end. Why do I say Machiavellian? Well, he was the one who coined the phrase, the ends justify the means. And ladies and gentlemen, I posit to you that that is government encapsulated in one egg. That's the acorn. Government has turned from the concept that we're here to protect and defend you and your individual rights and liberties. And that is our first and foremost goal and design. To now, the ends justify the means. We'll do whatever we got to do to you to get what we want. Ladies and gentlemen, that is lawlessness on a scale which no American should have to live under. That is a thugocracy, whether at county level, state, federal, or otherwise. So they're going to threaten, abuse, endanger their citizens to achieve a tax hike no one can afford and no one wants to pay. When they've already been paid in advance, and there's got to be ample other places they can cut the money. I mean, our governments are so full of fraud and waste and abuse at this point, and that's from the head in Washington, D.C., all the way down to the lowest level of county and city government. The waste and the fraud and the abuse are a pandemic on our governments. They're not symptomatic. They are a wholesale virus that has invaded the body. You see, the county commissioner comes out and he says, his name is Keith Heck. He says, the residents of the county that oppose the tax levy need to realize there's no fat to cut. I disagree. I guarantee you there's fat to cut. And the last thing, why is it, I am sorry, why is it whenever there are cuts to be made, the first claim you hear is firefighters, law enforcement, and teachers? I'll tell you why. Because that has the most immediate effect upon you. It has the most detrimental, the most damaging effect immediately on you. If teachers get cut, your kids don't learn as well. Or they're crowded into a classroom where overcrowding limits their ability to gain the education they need. Schools become more dangerous. When law enforcement gets cut, you immediately feel the effects. Law enforcement steps down, crime moves in. When firefighters get cut, hey, your house burned down, but, that's because you were unwilling to pay the tax. Tough luck to you, pal. Ladies and gentlemen, let me clarify for you what that is. That is coercion and hostage-taking. That's exactly what that is. That is taking you and your family and your possessions, the only things that government, first and foremost, that's their primary duty. And it is holding them hostage until you are willing to pay a ransom. That is the most despicable, unconscionable, unethical, immoral action that a government can take. And anyone in a government position that takes that, including a county commissioner, should be removed from office, forcibly if need be. Because if they can use coercion and threats of violence against you in order to coerce you to give up money paid as protection, then the citizens of that county, that city, that town, that state, and that nation have the right to resort back in the same exact fashion. Heck says he supports neighborhood watch groups and citizens being vigilant. But the rise of increasing, quote, aggressive community watch groups. Aggressive? Let me tell you, if this was my county, this guy would have to redefine the word aggressive. He might want to be one of those people that moves out of the county where there's better law enforcement protection. He says he's worried that the situation could escalate to violence. Hey, guess what? If the violence is already occurring because you've abandoned your post and you've abdicated the responsibility that you owe to your citizenry, then a violent response in order to cease the danger and the violence to the community is well called for. He says the only real solution is for the county citizens to provide more funds. Well, let me tell you something. That little county should not capitulate to a ransom claim. What they ought to do is get Mr. Heck and tar and feather him and run him out of town on a rail. That's what our founders would have done. What they ought to do is pass a county ordinance that gives them the ability to remove him with prejudice exigent. I'm tired of government abusing the focal point of their entire existence. And you should be too. You're listening to America's Voice. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a Wall Street honcho who comes out and says flat out, guns and ammo are required for a post-collapse world. Ladies and gentlemen, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice now. All right. See, those commercials aren't so painful, are they? Well, let me add one more to you. Make sure that you see our friends at the Battery Station, 303 Washington Avenue, West Plains, Missouri, 65775. 417-257-7799. You can email them at info@batterystation.com. You can visit their website at batterystation.com. They sell freeze-dried food in there. And by the way, I got to tell you, they'll ship. And if you've been looking at getting freeze-dried bulk cans and things like that, call Kevin and ask him for a price, because I'm telling you, I have seen his pricing be anywhere between $10 and $15 a can less than you can find it for on the internet. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a resource you should be taking advantage of. He's got flashlights and batteries and camera gear and all kinds of storage boxes and bins, waterproof OtterBox type things. He's got he's got these OtterBox specials where he's got 3 of them bundled together for so cheap you can't. I mean, it's below wholesale, but he buys in high bulk. If you're local, they carry ammunition. Call over there and find out what they've got in stock before you drive over there. I don't know what they, changes all the time. 417-257-7799. BatteryStation.com. Email them at info@batterystation.com, and they'll tell you what they got. I will tell you this. Kevin is probably one of the most honorable men that I know. And I say that with no... with no hesitation. I'd also like you to make sure that you visit our friends over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. Jason's a friend of mine. He's a young fella. He cuts my hair about once a week. And, I'm down to the washcloth combing deal days now. So, he just cuts it frequently. And he and a friend have opened up right behind their barbershop an outstanding tobacco shop where you can get pipes and tobacco and cigars. They've got special lighters. They've got, every little gadget and accoutrement you could use for cigar and pipe smoking. They've got humidors. They've got flasks. They've got humidors that you can rent there so you can keep your cigars there and then come in and you can smoke them right inside the building. They've got odor, or smoke eaters and all kinds of gadgeteria in there. There's a couple of large television screens, so if you want to get together with a few guys and watch the game, you can. If you want to have a bachelor party or something, they can accommodate you. You can bring your own alcohol, but they don't sell any. So if you want to keep a bottle of wine or a bottle of scotch over there and have yourself a cigar and a little nip, you're welcome to do that. I strongly encourage you to go over and visit with them. Excuse me. They're located on the square in West Plains. And it's a great opportunity for you to participate with that business. And I encourage you to tell them that you heard about it from Mike at americasvoicenow.org or just Mike at America's Voice. They know who I am. The reason I say that is because it helps them to know, one, that their advertising is working, and two, because they have really been instrumental in making sure that this program is available on the air for you. Yes, they get something out of it, but I got to tell you, I know these guys because and I see how they operate on a routine basis, and I got to tell you, these are good, patriotic, ethical American men who run these businesses, and they wouldn't support a program like this unless they were. They'd be running scared the other way because I'm not PC, folks. I don't gild the lily, and I don't hide the truth. I call it the way I see it. Some people may not like that. Hey, that's okay. You can go over there and watch Kim Kardashian. You can go over there and watch MSLSD. They'll tell you what you want to hear. I'm not going to. I'm going to tell you the realities of things. Now, granted, a lot of it's my opinion, but I think I back up my opinion with facts, and then I help you to analyze it so that you can energize your critical thinking skills and utilize those critical thinking skills to educate yourself, gather all the available data, pro and con, good and bad, fore and aft, and then, and only then, formulate an opinion that you own. Don't parrot someone else's. Always form your own opinions. The best way to do that, the only way to do that, is to have the educational information inside you that says, I know what I've learned about this particular topic, this issue, this segment, this, whatever it may be. And be well versed in it so that you can make intelligent and appropriate decisions and formulate appropriate and intelligent opinions. Then, by the way, now that you have that new information and you have an opinion that makes sense and has reason and logic tempered with compassion, now you're in a perfect position to go out there and share that with your personal circle of influence, whether that's some folks at church, whether that's 5 guys you have lunch with at work, whether that's the guy you ride in a truck with or a guy you sit at a cube with, whether that's a girl that you work with at your office. Educate, inform, motivate, and activate. Those are the key words that we use as a routine basis, or on a routine basis, because without education and information, you cannot possibly form. You're easy to fool. But when you know the facts, when you know what's going on around you, nobody can take advantage of you. You've got to have the willingness and the desire to be knowledgeable. It takes reading. It doesn't take just listening. You've got to read. And by the way, reading will benefit you in so many other vast ways. It will improve your vocabulary. It will improve your ability to spell. It will improve your ability to formulate your thoughts and then articulate them in a well-reasoned and orchestrated manner that makes sense to other people. It will help you to take complex topics and break them down so that other lay people can understand a very complicated issue. It'll help you to draw and build on analogies that are mental pictures that people will say, wow, I get it now. I understand that. You put that into a perspective that I grasped. Let me tell you something, folks. The only duty we have between now and the end of our lives, right now, is to make sure that when we pass, the torch of liberty has been moved on and upheld, kept alive, kept lit, kept flaming, kept roaring. You know why? One, we owe that. We've benefited our entire lives from what this republic has been able to provide for us. A home, a family, a job, possessions. I mean, let's be candid. The poorest of us in the United States lives the good life in comparison to the vast majority of the world. I mean, you got running water, you got refrigeration, you got entertainment, you got a warm house, you got a cool house in the summer. You may live in cramped conditions that are less than optimal, but let's be honest, you're not 8 of you sharing a one-room cinder block shack with no running water and no electricity by flashlight and going out there to poop in a ditch on the side of the road. That's the way a lot of the world lives, folks. A huge percentage. So don't overlook the benefits that you've gotten from living underneath this republic. Don't be afraid to recognize the value of what you've gained. And then pay it forward. I hear a lot of people say to me, oh, I'm doing this for my kids. I'm doing this for my grandkids. I am too, to a certain extent. But I'm also doing it because I don't want to end up living the last few years I have of my life in a camp somewhere, being indoctrinated under a re-education program. Thanks very much. Because I can tell you right now, at this stage in the game, this long-toothed dog ain't going to re-educate. I'm too set in my beliefs. And they know that, which means I may not get re-educated at all. I may get realigned from vertical to horizontal. And in light of that, there's a brand new article. That was a good segue, wasn't it? There's a brand new article out there in Washington Examiner. It says, be prepared. Wall Street advisor recommends guns and ammo for protection in a collapse. This guy's a top financial advisor. And he's been worried that Obamacare and the spying scandal on the NSA and the IRS and all this other nonsense and the spiraling debt and, we're in this tornado of national debt and not only national but county and state and city and every other area, right? That the chances are climbing for a fiscal and social disaster to ensue. I couldn't agree with him more. David John Marotta. He's a contributor to Forbes magazine. He's a financial advisor, and he's an expert on Wall Street. And he's basically said in a note to his investors in his newsletter, firearms are the last item on the list, but they are on the list. There are some terrible people in this world, and you are safer when your trusted neighbors have firearms. He's recommending that people have and create and build and keep local a bug-out bag. That's what he actually calls it. That includes food, a weapon, ammo to help them stay alive. In this memo or this newsletter, he's done it as part of a series addressing the potential for a financial apocalypse, based purely on debt. I think there's a lot more politics involved in that than just debt, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter how we get there. The truth of the matter is it's only a question of when we get there, not if. He says the problems that are plaguing the country, he doesn't think won't result in a hardcore hit the brakes Armageddon type scenario that, Monday everything's fine and Wednesday the whole world is, gone kaflooey. But he says there is the possibility of a precipitous decline along with a long and drawn out malaise that is much more likely. Well, he may say that because he's talking to investors and he's trying not to create panic, and he doesn't want to come off as a tinfoil hat. But personally, we're already in the long and drawn-out malaise. I mean, and at the end of the malaise, if we hit the edge of that the cliff of that malaise, where's there to go? That's when the precipitous decline ceases to become a precipitous slope and it becomes a sheer cliff face. He says that many of his clients fear an end-of-the-world type scenario. Now, these are people who, let's face it, he's a financial investor, right? He's a financial advisor and a money manager. So, you don't go to a guy like that when, you've got $10,000 or $15,000 to invest. You go to a guy like that when you got hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to invest. And he says, and they come to him with their concerns, and they say, look, here's my situation. I'm employed or I'm retired, and here's what I have resource-wise, and here's my scenario. Here's my children are getting ready for college, or they're out of college, and it's an empty nest, and our needs have changed, and blah, blah, whatever their personal scenario may be. And our concern is that we either want to retire and live in style and travel to the south of France to have a glass of wine, and then jet flight over to, Brazil and see the Mardi Gras, or they say, our real fear here is that our cash will, for all intents and purposes, evaporate in high inflation. Our government is going to collapse. Our financial scenario is going to collapse because of the Federal Reserve and the actions on the part of these deleterious, incompetent boobs who classify themselves as our leaders and our alleged representatives. And in the event that kind of debt and deficit eats us up, we're going to have an economic outcome that will call for all intents and purposes, the complete breakdown of everything that we've known. He says he doesn't agree with that outcome. But he does agree with much of what people have as worries. Here's what he says. I, along with many other economists, agree with many of the concerns expressed in these dire warnings. The growing debt and deficit spending is a tax on those holding dollar bills. The devaluation in the U.S. dollar risks the dollar's status as the reserve currency of the world. Obamacare was the worst legislation in the past 75 years. Socialism is on the rise, and the NSA really is abrogating vast portions of the Constitution. I don't disagree with their concerns. That's what he wrote in his newsletter. So, as a result of that, he recommends that Americans should have a survival kit to take care of themselves in the case of a financial or a natural disaster. He recommends a 72-hour crisis window bag that, you've got enough food and enough necessities in there to take care of yourself. Quote, a bug-out bag is a good idea depending upon where you live, even if the emergency is just power outages, earthquakes, and hurricanes. And with your preparedness, you will be equipped to help others who might be in need. Be prepared, especially because it keeps you from being scared. He then puts up a list of items on there that he recommends for a bug-out bag, and some even complete bags you can buy on Amazon, which I strongly do not recommend. What I would recommend you do is get a hold of Kevin over at the battery station. He's got an excellent book that actually covers this, and he'll ship it to you. In fact, just tell him, I can't think of the name of the title right now, but it's How to Build a Bug-Out Bag. And it is an extraordinarily valuable resource. This guy gets deep and dirty into what you need, why you need it, what you don't want to have, what you think you might need, and why you really don't need that, and what you haven't thought of that you need that will maybe be the deciding factor in whether you live or die. Very, very astute book. I would encourage you, and if I think of it, I'll put it up. I'll post it up on our Facebook and here on Patriot FB, the name of that book, and I'll put Kevin's number on there. You can call him at 417-257-7799, or you can email him at info@batterystation.com. Tell him it's the book Mike was talking about on America's Voice about building a bug-out bag. He'll know exactly what book it is because he gave me one, and I read it, and I was very, very impressed with it. In fact, I went back and I bought copies, and I've sent them to my family. And I don't often do that. The point of all of this is this. This is not the first of the stories that we've seen about people who are in the know in the economic world, very, very well heeled, who have made it clear that they don't consider taking preparedness to be a tinfoil hat exercise. There was an article I did probably a year ago about a group of individuals who are Wall Street tycoons. These guys are building and setting themselves up for, of course, they've got the money to do it, so it makes it really easy because, it's just an investment. But these guys are preparing, underground facilities for their families and look, ladies and gentlemen, if these people who are in Wall Street, who make millions of dollars a year, they recognize the emergency, they recognize the danger, they recognize the exigent threat, how can you not? How can you not acknowledge it, recognize it, decide that you're going to take some action? If you don't have some preparation level accomplished for yourself and your family, you have been negligent in your duty to them. I can't say that strongly enough to you. If you have been derelict in your duty to your family because you just want to continue along with your head in the sand and your butt in the air, the problem is that what you don't recognize is because you're the household leader, whether male or female, you're responsible for them. That is your sacred duty. Maybe it's parents. Maybe it's not a wife or a husband and children. Maybe it's your parents who need that kind of protection. But the truth of the matter is, whatever the circumstance, I don't care if you're single, do what you can so that when the crisis comes, whatever that may be, you're in a position to not only help yourself and protect your own interests and those of your family, but those of your neighbors who maybe woke up late. I'll give you an example. I have a friend who lives back in New Jersey where I grew up, and I talked to him after they had that storm Sandy, which wiped everything out. And there was a power outage in his community. He lives in a townhouse. And this power outage had knocked out the power for about 10 days. And he couldn't go to work because the power was out there. He couldn't stay at home because it was cold and it was, So basically he went to go stay with some friends in a neighboring state. And he was telling me all about it and how difficult it was. And I said to him, you and I have had this discussion numerous times. And every time I talk about you being prepared and having a bug-out plan of action and a bag that, you can get up and go if in the event of an emergency, you poo-poo it and tell me how crackpot, knuckleheaded I am and how that's tinfoil conspiracy theory nonsense and all of that. And here you are telling me that you've only made it through this storm by the grace of someone who was willing to put you up, feed you, water you, give you some clothing, take care of you. And you were totally dependent upon them for a 10-day window. Who's the crackpot now? And let's just take the scenario one step further and say, now, perhaps this wasn't only 10 days. What if it was 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks? How long do you think your welcome would last? When the days stretched into weeks and the weeks stretched into months. Yeah, that's what I thought. Now, I said, here you go. You got motorcycles, you and your girl. Well, what am I going to do with that? I got a car that'll go 4 times as far on a tank of gas. I said, yeah, but when you're living in New Jersey and you got to get out of the state and there's only 4 or 5 bridges to get out, you and about 5 other million people are all going to be trying to get over that single or 2-lane bridge. Whereas on a motorcycle, you can pretty much thwart the traffic. Yeah, but it only goes so far. I said, great. So then let's put some thinking caps on and figure out what to do. Oh, I got it. How about a cache of gasoline 200 miles away that you can actually reach? Oh, I didn't think of that. I rest my case. You see, sometimes it's just a little creative thought. Sometimes you need to, get a little edge up and get a little bump, so to speak. There's a bunch of, survival podcasters out there. Survival podcast with Spearco, Jack Spearco. I've been on his program. Excellent website. There's a survival blog, which is out there, which is written by Rawls. I mean, great author. I mean, if you want to know anything about that, go to survival blog and read. I mean, folks, the amount of information there is staggering. You want to plan a bug-out bag? Go over there. Free website. Just jump on and start reading. Guess what I'm trying to tell you here is don't wait until the 11th hour to decide to do something. Because, when a crisis strikes, that's not the time to be running around and deciding, gee whiz, where are those boots I had? That's not the time to say, let's see, where should we get a couple of packages of ramen noodles? That's not the time to say, I wonder if we can, fit some more cans into this bag. That's not the time to say, well, I got this 22 rifle, but I don't have any ammo. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. Thanks for riding with us today. It's Friday. This is our last broadcast of the week. We'll see you next week, bright and early. That will be, I think, the 30th, and on the first, Tuesday, we'll do that show on Tuesday. But on Wednesday, I'm going to take New Year's Day off, and I hope you will too. You can find us on the web by visiting us at americasvoicenow.org. You can also find us at facebook.com/America's Voice Now and youtube.com/America's Voice Now. Also, Patriot FB, like in Facebook.com. PatriotFB.com. You can catch our show live there, streaming on audio. Make sure that you sign up there. And we'll see you next week. Have a great day, great weekend. God bless you all.